Hello and welcome to the April 2018 edition of MyTechU, a monthly educational series for technology and business topics. My name is Nathan Austin and I will be your moderator today. This month we will be discussing how to build a winning employee engagement strategy. We're actually fortunate to have Adam Weber, who's the founder and VP of Sales of Amplify, who will lead us through today's topic. But before we turn the presentation over to Adam, a couple notes for the audience. First of all, thanks for joining us today. This presentation is being recorded, and we will make it available 24 hours after the presentation, and you will be emailed the link tomorrow. The audience is on mute. However, if you have a question, please use the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll do our best to interject your question into the conversation, or we'll follow up with you afterwards. So before I hand it over to Adam, I want to say that Amplify is an organization that MyTech has been engaging with to help us with our culture. And they've done a really good job of helping us identify areas for improvement from our staff's perspective, things that we oftentimes as leaders and managers aren't always exposed to. So Adam's going to walk us through that today, but I just want to kind of also put a stamp of approval that they've been great to work with MyTech, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to share them with all of you today. So with that said, Adam, please introduce yourself and lead us through the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. Everyone, hi. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I'm Adam Weber. I'm one of the co-founders and VP of Sales here at Amplify, and look forward to talking to you today about employee engagement. I do know you all have busy schedules, so I don't take for granted that you've taken time to learn a little bit. And my goal today is that you'll get something out of this, something tactical, something that when you leave, you can actually write it down and implement in your world. And so hopefully, if you're having lunch, grab your Jimmy John's and let's rock and roll. So. We'll start here, and that is that just the world has changed a lot in the last 20 years. Tiger Woods, for example, was half the size. His teeth were still sparkling pearly white as they are now. Friends was the #1 show in America, and to tell you a little bit about my upbringing, I was not allowed to watch it. My older brother was. I had to sit in the other room when this show was on, and of course, the Zach Morris cell phone was also just a huge hit at that time too. Rocking that with a belt clip on your side, and life was good. And then, the other thing that obviously changed was myself. This is me back in 1997, and of course, we're doing this as a webinar, so you can't see me now. For all you know, I'm still taking pictures with my eyes closed, wearing XXL shirts. I do like to mention here, just as a quick aside, like, this is the best photo I had from 1997. Like, I asked my mom for a photo for this talk, and I went through them, and this is what she gave me. So as a joke, my coworkers who saw this said, Adam, if that Adam saw who you married, like, they would be very proud of you. Like, you've definitely leveled up. So, but beyond that, like, obviously.
Love that, by the way.
Thanks. Beyond like just the culture changing, right? Our workforce has just fundamentally shifted a lot in the last 20 years. You went from a workforce that obviously had no millennials to 25 years. It is now the largest segment of the entire workforce. And just to be clear, this is not a millennial talk in any way. But what it did do, though, is it fundamentally changed our workforce. And it changed every generation, because now people don't look at their jobs as a place that they're going to stay for 35 years. Everybody holds a looser view of their work. And so tenure is dramatically decreased by generation. And when you take tenure decreasing, and for a millennial it's 2 years, and in every other generation it's still quickly shrinking, and a 4% unemployment rate, you start to run into some real issues as a business owner, as a leader, and as someone who manages a people strategy. And so why does this matter? Like, why does it matter that people are leaving more than they ever have? For one, it is expensive. On average, and there's lots of ways to factor this, but when we look across our entire customer base, what we see is that it costs roughly 150% of a person's annual salary to replace them. You also have obviously lost productivity time, onboarding time, all that as well. It also is a very time-consuming proposition. Right now, I just saw the latest numbers on this. It's 30 days to fill a vacancy. And for those of you who are responsible for filling vacancies on this webinar, you know what it's like. It is a lot of work. It's hard when we lose really good people, and it takes an exceptional amount of time to find great people to replace them. And
so, hey,
part
Adam,
of this,
just a quick,
oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just curious with the last data point you mentioned about 150% of their salary and this time, is that inclusive of, I'm assuming that's inclusive of like the people that are responsible for training and onboarding and like inside, like, so it's not just the lost productivity of not having the role, but it's the greater impact on the organization. Is that true relative to this other data point?
Yeah, exactly. We use 150 as a general figure that batches in, and everybody's different. I've heard people that are as high as 250% and people as low as 100, but we include, that would include like the recruitment cost, the training cost, the lost productivity, and the replacement of that person as well.
And it probably varies by role, again, to your point of, you may have some roles in your organization that the cost is 200%, and some roles in your organization that maybe 100%. I mean, like you're saying, so that might be, yeah. No, that's cool. Thank you. I hadn't really mapped some of that together with a percentage before. So
yeah. Yeah, and then along with this too, like when you think about how just the culture's changed, right now people. And this is part of the millennial influence, but it goes across all generations, is that people care about reputation more than they ever have. So 75% of Americans said they wouldn't work for a company with a bad reputation. And as we all know, the employee now has access to this information in a way that they've never had before. And so they can quickly, through Glassdoor or through reviews, they can learn all about your culture in all sorts of different ways. And so reputation means more, and in many ways means more than even what you pay for lots and lots of the workforce. Now, all hope is not lost. This is not a doom and gloom talk. I'm going to give you tactical tips here, but because highly engaged employees, they're 87% less likely to leave than their disengaged counterparts. This holds true with millennials as well. In every segment of the population, people are willing to stay if they're engaged. The reality, though, is that only 30% of your workforce is engaged. And I know that you see numbers like this all the time, and it's easy just to kind of like, okay, I've heard this before, but like really truly think about that and make it real for you. Think of 10 people in your office and realize that only 3 of those 10 today are likely bringing their best self to your office every day. 7 of those 10 are having what I call a lean back posture, not bringing their best self, have more to give, but they're just not inspired to push the business forward. And obviously when that's happening, right, when you've got a workforce that's largely disengaged, it starts to really hurt your business. And how that hits you is when you've got a disengaged worker, they're not as productive as they should be. They're not as innovative as they could be. And then that starts to hurt all these key metrics of your business. You're not as profitable, hurts your brand reputation, which we just talked about matters so much, and obviously turnover as well. I mean, the fact is that when you have a majority of your workforce that take a lean back posture, many things are impacted. And for the past 20 years, and even more so in the last 3 to 5 years, engagement's been this topic that started to have a lot of buzz around it, but it's been really fluffy. But the reality is behind this is there's real hard data, and people are starting to make the shift to realize that investing in engagement and creating a highly engaged workforce, it pays off for your business. I like this example just because it shows the S&P 500 and over the last 5 years what a $1,000 investment would give you. But what's interesting is more than 2x higher than that are Glassdoor companies where the employee has self-selected to say that there's a highly engaged culture. And this is what more and more leaders and CFOs and CEOs and COOs are realizing. It's that a highly engaged workforce actually means something to the bottom line. It's not just fluffy conversation anymore. And so what is it? What is this thing called employee engagement? How do we make it not fluffy? And how do we put some tactical things in place that can impact our workforce? And so at the core, employee engagement is an employee's intellectual and emotional connection with an employer, demonstrated by motivation and commitment to positively impact the company's vision and goals. So simply put, employee engagement is how an employee thinks about the business in their head, how they feel about the business in their heart, and how that impacts the work that they do every day with their hands. And so, if you really deconstruct employee engagement at its core, There's multiple things that are going on. I would love to say that we're all simple human beings, but all of us have these multiple things that impact whether or not we bring our best self to work every day. There's 3 psychological conditions that are at play in every single person when they show up to work every day. There's psychological safety, this idea that my situation is predictable and secure. There's meaning. Do I have a sense of why behind my job? And there's capacity. Is the task assigned to me reasonable, and do I have all the resources needed? But then beneath those psychological conditions, it goes even deeper than that. And one of the things we've done is work with psychologists and PhDs to really deconstruct what are all the aspects of a human being that are at play that dictate whether or not they bring their best self. And so these are the 14 drivers that we list up there, and I'm not going to go through each of them, but what they do is they give you a sense of like what is at play in your people's lives. Things like having shared values with the people they work with, having autonomy to do their best work. Obviously, the most important that hopefully you see up there, number 11, is their manager. That person that they interact with that has so much impact on whether or not that person is bringing their best self to work. So one thing I do want to just make sure there's clarity on is that engagement is not satisfaction. It's not happiness. It's not retention. Engagement is truly a lean-in posture that is whether or not a person is going to drive the business forward. So when you think of satisfaction, I view it as a lean-back posture. Am I comfortable? Am I going to stay? I'm only going to work enough to meet the basic expectations. You know these people. When we talk about the 10 people you think of, those 7 who do the minimum amount possible to keep their job, not the people who show up and try to drive the business forward. So, 15 years ago, the main way people track this was they would look at things like satisfaction. But the problem with satisfaction is that if you pay someone too much to do too little, they are very likely quite satisfied. They're very likely not going to quit, but they're also not very likely going to drive your business forward. And that's the thing that we're after, that lean-in posture of activated employees that are trying to drive the business forward. And the numbers back this up. An engaged staff is 44% more productive than a satisfied staff. And so,
I see, I think about how, if I may, translating that, so we have, we try and translate this to some of our values. I'm not trying to make this about MyTech, but just like we have a couple of values like provide more value than we receive in payment and set the next person up for success. Those are just, reject mediocrity, and innovate through creativity. Like some of the things that, if someone's just doing the minimum, they're not going to be doing those things. They're not going to seek to do that little extra thing, whether it's an extra communication or, an extra little documentation or, helping out the next person. That totally makes sense. Like the lean back versus lean forward. I love that perspective. Is that? Would you agree? Did I hit that? What part of what you're talking about?
That's exactly it. It's that arrow, those arrows down slide I showed, where it's like that person with the lean back posture. How there's it could be in the details or how you treat a customer, or it's contagious in that sense, where the more people that have that lean forward posture, it contagiously can influence the entire culture. So spot on with sounds like some of the things you guys are working on. One of the aspects of this, if you think about just how the culture's transitioned, 15 years ago, satisfaction, 20 years ago, that's what we were looking at 20 years ago. Whereas today, the type of leader that can thrive in this environment is just different. And so, I'm fortunate enough to talk to CEOs and leaders of businesses all across the country and have seen, through these thousands of conversations, different type of leaders that do well and other leaders that are having a hard time adapting. And so I want to just talk through these 2 leaders that'll kind of set up the framework for how you can maximize and get the most out of your teams and how you can create that lean-in culture at your company. So leader A takes this mindset. My employees are lucky to be a part of my team and to have a job at a successful company. Things I hear those managers say, the employee lacks work ethic. They want to be involved in everything, and they really care a lot about that life part of the work-life balance. And you hear these types of conversations a lot, and there's a lot of frustration behind this. Why someone who's only been at the company 2 years cares so much about why decisions are made. Whereas the other leader that we run into who is adapting right now and thriving takes this mindset. It says, My employees have made the decision to work for me, and it is my responsibility to ensure that their work is both challenging and meaningful. Which of those is harder? Which type of leader is it harder to be? I think that's the challenge with leader B for all of us, is that leader B puts the pressure on the leader. And to be a great leader in this time and to be a successful leader, you have to be good at it. And the things that we see them doing, those leaders, those managers, is inspiring the best, setting clear goals, and focusing on outcome, not hours. And then also the last piece is radically candid. I put this radically candid piece on here because if you are looking for one takeaway of the thousands of conversations I've had, if I could give you one piece of advice that would most impact that you could take away that's going to impact your team today, it is be radically candid. The culture's changed. People have access, unlimited access to unlimited information. And as much as you want to just make a leadership decision from the top down and every person in the organization to go, yes, great leader, thank you so much for that decision, oh wise one. It doesn't work that way anymore. So pull back the curtain, give visibility, explain why you made decisions, good, bad, and different. We all as leaders have to make really hard decisions, but we should do them in a fair, thoughtful way, and in a way that we're confident enough about and vulnerable enough about that we can talk to our teams about it. And so I want to transition and just talk through 7 really tactical things that you can do. Ways that you can try to build an engagement strategy and get the most out of your teams. And so I just call this like the screenshot slide. So if you want to take a quick screenshot to summarize the entire presentation, go ahead and do that now. But then what I'll do is I'll walk through each of these 7 tips and hopefully, give you something to go home with, to take back into your workplace after this is over. So I know, for each of us, we all have different worlds. I'm speaking a lot of this, everything I do in this talk is a combination of things that I'm a tactician myself. I run a business too and manage a team. And so I'm implementing these same tips, but they're also things I've learned from other people along the way too. So not all of this, might be relevant to you, but I do hope that there'll be 1 or 2 that you can really get some value out of for you. So clear hiring attributes is 1, integrate your team into your hiring decisions, set goals, align around your company's purpose, continually improve, let your employees self-solution, and use data. So let's start with the clear hiring attributes. And the reality of good hiring attributes and knowing what you're hiring for is that great hires start with great culture. I can't tell you the hundreds of conversations I've had where leaders know that they're rowing in the wrong direction and how hard it is to change your trajectory when you've got the wrong people rowing the boat. And so by creating a great hiring process and a great front-end filter to secure talent that can drive your business forward is vital. It's how we can thrive as a leader. And so the first thing is just making sure that you've got the right culture in place. One of the things that we do to help leaders with that is defining what your culture is. This is called the engagement canvas. At the end of this, I'll have a call to action, but if you want to add on that, just that you would like to receive this engagement canvas, it's a 1-page PDF. We'll just send it to you for free, and hopefully it's a helpful worksheet. Lots and lots of leadership teams have sat down and just collaborated on this together. But just to really think through what makes your culture exist. Why do you exist in the world? And that's one on the far left that I really like. And then the other one that I like to think through is that engagement exemplified. Like taking time to go, who are those 1 or 2 employees that, when I'm home, I know the work is getting done in the way that I love it being done. And they truly represent what I'm trying to build here. And so think through those people on that engagement exemplified and write them out and kind of what are the characteristics and traits that they have. And then from that, what I do is I create a hiring rubric around that. I think through what those traits are that make someone successful for each role. And then I create a quantifiable way to measure employees based on that rubric. And so what's your hiring rubric? If you want to create a great hiring process, do you have a quantitative way to gain alignment across your different people that touch candidates? And so I actually shared mine. I put it up here. I know, your roles are probably different than mine. I hire lots of salespeople. I hire both quota-bearing sales reps and entry-level salespeople who are cold calling. But candidly, this is the main stuff that I'm looking for, and everybody's roles are different. But I'm looking for emotional intelligence, curiosity, grit, and discipline. And I've reverse engineered questions that help me uncover this, and then I share them across the team. We all score employees, so I usually have at least 3 people touch an interview candidate, and then we compare scores and then go from there. And so at the end of each of these tips, I have summarized everything in case, I know it's just trying to gather a lot of information quickly, so making sure that you can gather this. So just as a summary, and one thing on my rubric, I guess that's really important too with that culture is once I've defined the culture, I make culture a yes, no. And so if people exemplify the core values of the organization and they fit the culture, then that's a yes. But if it's not, we don't make hiring decisions for people that aren't great culture fits here. And then also just categorize three or four categories scored 1 to 5. Have multiple people score so you're not doing this on your own, and then create a standard set of questions that uncover what those are. And that translates really well into the next topic, which is like how to integrate your team into your hiring decision. When you think through those cultural ambassadors on that canvas and you think through what people best exemplify your culture, I can't recommend enough getting those people involved in your hiring process. And so just yesterday I had a interview. I was interviewing someone, and during that conversation I said, hey, when you work here, it's a tough job. We've got high demands. We're growing really fast, and one of the things that I need is for you to feel confident that this is a good fit for you. And so ask that person to go have one-on-one time with one of these cultural ambassadors. In an ideal state, this is off-site, but where that cultural ambassador, who is usually at the same level as the role you're hiring for, also gets to vet whether or not they're a good fit. The benefit of going off-site or at least getting them to that level is it takes away that role power dynamic, like, oh, this person's going to be my boss someday. And it helps the person who's considering the job think through, like, if this might be a good fit for them. And you will be surprised at the candid feedback you can get by empowering your cultural ambassadors to incorporate them into the interview process. And then the last piece I'll say is that I give those ambassadors the ability to say no. I give them full authority. So if they come back and go, hey, I don't think this is a good fit, I ultimately do say no, and it does happen. And I think the key here is there's a couple parts to that. One is you want to hire great people, but 2, remember, if you're managing a culture that only has 30% of your people who are engaged and leaning forward, the way that you get more people to be engaged is by getting them to think like owners. And to get them to think like owners, you have to trust them to make great decisions. And when you do that, you'll start to activate this side of who they are that gets them to lean in when they show up to work every day.
Adam, as you mentioned that, like that's something that we might not to make this about MyTech at all, but we actually have a culture interview as part of our process as well, our hiring process. And in fact, it's a group, and the hiring manager is not there, but it's other staff that may be working with this person or on the culture committee that we have, and they do, and we instruct the candidate, like, this is also your opportunity to ask questions of our team, and we instruct them to be as candid as they feel comfortable being, but just tell them the truth, be just openly honest with them about, like, ask questions of them that you normally don't get to ask until after you've already started with a company and have been there 90 days or longer. And it's actually been one of not only vetting that, getting multiple perspectives on culture fit, but it's also been, I think, and this is my opinion, but I think I've seen it play out where it's almost a competitive advantage, because when you get great people that want to work at a company with great culture, they are able to see it. And most, at least in my experience, most companies aren't doing that where we're competing for candidates. And so, like, we're able to, I think, kind of bend tip the scales to us because we go through that process too. So there's kind of multiple benefit, at least that we've experienced.
That is great. Yeah, that is a perfect example and application of what that looks like. I do think it's a competitive advantage in the hiring process and gives you visibility that otherwise you wouldn't have. So that's a great example. Number 3 is setting goals. And I will call this my no-duh one, but so rarely actually applied. So just pause for a second and consider how effective you really are at doing this right now. Setting goals with your team, and where they have something that they're striving for. When you think, sometimes in your organization there are certain roles, and if you're in manufacturing or construction trade or even in the tech world like I am, in the sales world, there could be jobs that are a grind, that have a day-to-day component to them that can really wear people out. where they can start to question why they're doing it. They can start to question where their growth is. And so understanding your employees' why is really important way to motivate and sustain long-term success. And especially when you're in a high turnover environment, say you've got over 100% year-over-year turnover in a role, if you can take teams where we've taken teams that can stretch that 12 months simply to 18 months, it can dramatically change and transform the business. And so the way that I implement this is my actual goal sheet that I work on with my team. So there's a couple parts to it, but the biggest, as you'll see at the top, is we do this a larger session once a year. It's a 2-hour session, and we go through both professional and personal goals. And our goal is to really uncover kind of what those personal goals are. We ask people to share if they're comfortable, and it ends up being a great both team building experience, but it also for the manager allows the manager to understand what's truly motivating that person. So an example would be like a professional goal would be, I really want this promotion by this day. Motivating, right? And we can tell them what they need to do tactically. But a goal that I just heard recently for one of my employees was, by the end of this year, I want my wife to be able to quit her job and stay home with the kids. Now I've tapped into that employee's why. So when I'm creating a lean-in posture when I'm training managers, we're trying to activate that lean-in posture of that team. So once I know that, now I can talk through what habits have to happen in their life, what are the achievements they need to do to accomplish a goal like that, which is an incredibly motivating goal. So this is my general format. Again, know your employees' why. I want you to focus on both professional and personal goals. Have a high-level conversation once a quarter. And I do like to do that just where it's like at once a quarter, we talk about the future. We get off site. It's less about performance and how you're doing in the ticky-tacks of the day-to-day. And it's more like, how does your current day-to-day tie to the big vision of your why? And then lastly, just by having that, opening up that dialogue around team communication as well. The next one is aligning around your company's purpose. I would challenge all of you to think through, most people probably on this webinar who are running businesses or in leadership have a pretty clear sense of why your company exists. But if I walked around your plant floor right now or went out into the field with your trades folks and said, hey, why does this company exist? Why is it different than the other construction company? Would the answers be consistent? Would we hear lots of things that are the same or different, or what would it be? And so having a really succinct company purpose that people feel connected to is vital. For us, for example, our goal is to improve the work lives of 1 million Americans. Every single person in this business, I expect them to know that. And people say back to me all the time, yeah, Adam, but like you're in a tech company, like, okay, and it's employee engagement for crying out loud. Like, of course you guys have a real clear thing. But I have seen this in all sorts of industries. I was talking to a friend of mine, Mike Stone. He's the president of CertaPro, which is a painting organization, national painting franchise. And I asked him that. I said, what's your why? And he just so quickly articulated. He said, there's nothing in America that can transform a space more affordably and more beautifully than paint. And I've seen that over and over for line manufacturers and for painters and for plumbers and whatever that role is. It's like, especially when you talk about those people that are your line level workers doing that day-to-day thankless job, they need to understand what the bigger picture is. Also, just to reiterate how their role ties to the bigger picture. And so whatever you can do to do that, whether it's sharing customer stories regularly that tie back to their role, or celebrating milestones that map to the success that they're doing. I think it's easy when you're in leadership to take for granted the thankless nature of lots of your employees' work and how that work is actually allowing you to accomplish the vision that you want to see in the world. And there's not like, bring them along for the journey, get them on board with the excitement of why you do what you do and why you're passionate about it. And I can't stress enough, it doesn't matter what your business is, you can do this. You can do this, and you can have across the board alignment with your entire team on why you exist and why their role means something. It's truly the difference. It's the parable, the story you've probably all heard about the bricklayer who one's out laying bricks and the other's building a cathedral. And it's a mindset that we're after from your people. And for you, it can be an unfair advantage against your competitors. And it's something that for someone who has a trades job, for example, it's something that will sustain them. And it's a it's an unfair advantage in the market, in the competitive market too. I hear all the time people say this phrase like, well, at my company, people just leave for a quarter more an hour. They find another job where the air conditioning's 1 degree lower and they pay 25 cents more an hour. This is one of the things that prevents that. People usually don't leave for money or not as often as you think they certainly don't leave as often as you think they do. And so having some things like this that connect and make your job different and give both reputation and meaning to their work is really important.
You know, Adam, on that point, as you do that, like one of the challenges and one of the things that as we've grown and we are nowhere near perfect by any means, but as some of the things that we've really around that point is, I think we did an okay job several years ago of actually defining what our mission and vision were. But we didn't do a good job of translating that, as you mentioned, mapping it to individual roles and being prescriptive about what that means and modeling or amplifying behavior, or emulating behavior or whatever, right? Like explaining that to people, because as you grow, as you grow, it just increases the probability of interpretation being completely different. And sometimes interpretation isn't necessarily bad as long as it's in the right rowing the same direction, like you said, right? But I know that this is an area where, you know, it's hard work actually to get that really defined and succinct. But if you don't have a clear picture, your staff absolutely don't. Right. And that was kind of the big aha moment for us, is like we were being asked questions by business advisors that we've been working with and consultants and trying to help us work on this. And we couldn't articulate it succinctly. So if you can't, I mean, there's no way your staff are gonna. So it's hard work, but it's been invaluable. At least even the exercise that we've been trying to go through to do a better job ourselves of doing that, even though we've got a long way to go.
Yep. No, that's great, Nathan. I think you're spot on too. It's like the key is, one, can everyone articulate it? And then two, what things can you do to reiterate it? And sometimes it's not the reiteration's easier than you think too. It's like an example on my team. So the folks that cold call all day, what we do for them is we do a 10-minute meeting every 2 weeks where the people that interact with our customers that get to hear these stories of life change, we bring them right in front of the cold callers and just go, give us 10 minutes of sharing the best things that have happened. And it's just that juice that they need to keep them going. So the next one is continual improvement. You know, when you, as a leader, the key is that this starts with you. For all of us with our ambitious goals, if we want to accomplish as a company our highest ambitions, it has to start with us, and we have to be committed to getting better and fostering a culture of getting better. And so I share this slide, I share this picture just because this represents me doing this. So right beside me is my friend and mentor, Derek Grant. He's the VP of sales at a company called SalesLoft. And simply put, he's better at my job than I am. And he's a person that has taken me under his wing so I can learn from him, and he does the same with someone else as well. And so this is an example that I'm sharing with my team when I go out and I spend a day with him, 12 hours with him and his team, and asking as many questions as I could. And I consistently want my team to know that I'm going to expect a lot out of them, but I also am doing the same for myself. And so it starts with you as a leader. And if you want people to get better, you have to give them consistent feedback and that radical candor piece that we talked about earlier. And then do you have a professional development plan for them? And even if you're in that high turnover role I was talking about, like that 12-month turnover year over year, like put together some milestones. I was talking to a welder just a couple of weeks ago, president of a welding company, and he said, hey, I created this reading plan actually for my welders on professional development to enhance their skills. And it started to stretch out that time of how quickly they were leaving. And then the last is just do their job on occasion and ask for feedback. More often than not, this is the one takeaway people say that they're going to commit to doing. If it's easy because of role power and because candidly the jobs that people on your team are doing often are a lot harder than your job, to feel distant and disconnected, and you forget what it's like to be in their shoes. And so go and do their job. Whether it's every 30 days or once a quarter, take the time to make sure you're doing every role on the team, and then ask for feedback on how you're doing. I do this myself. I record myself doing sales calls and then submit it to my team and ask for feedback because I do the same for them. And so, I can't stress enough, just like breaking down those barriers, being a leader that they can relate to, and doing their job And when you do that too, to create that activated mindset of your people, you'll start to see some broken processes, and it'll open up a little bit softer conversation between them on how to make things better. The next is use data. There's all sorts of companies like ours out there that no longer do you have to use gut feel to make business decisions. We take a scientific approach to measuring engagement, where you can, if you don't have clear visibility in what's blocking your team from that lean in posture, you can use science and data to find it. It's not just reserved for Fortune 500 companies anymore. You can be a company of 30 people and use science and data to make better business decisions. And what that does, it just allows you to stop guessing and stop wasting time. And then the last is just let your employees self-solution. Once you pinpoint what problems are inside the org, ask your people how to solve them. And we do it in a simple format, which just says, hey, what should we start or stop doing around this area? And so let me just share a quick story that I'll close with, and that is a story of one of our customers, TH Marine. They're a boat manufacturer, 70 employees. So this, again, it's not reserved. Science and data and letting your people self-solution isn't reserved for these big companies, but 70-person boat manufacturer, their general manager was tasked with improving employee turnover on his floor workers, who are turning over at 100% year over year. And we ran some data with them and found out that driver, if you see in the bottom right, was utilization that was low. And we pinpointed that issue, and then we asked their people, how can we solve this problem? And in the background, you can actually see that team. It's not a big team, but they're showing up to work every day, a lot of turnover going on, and Jeff knew that the team was capable of more than they currently were. And that utilization driver is showing, basically, we got people clocking in, clocking out, and we know they have more to bring, and they're not sharing it with us. So we asked them, what should we start doing? And sometimes when you get to your people and you clear those barriers, you'll find really simple solutions. They said, hey, we need a table lift, so we don't need 2 people to lift the boat parts. We need extension cords so we don't have to plug and unplug things. And could you paint the walls white? It's just kind of sad in here. It's a little gray. So 3 simple changes, cost them less than $10,000. And they went from creating the lowest engaged team, this one team was the lowest engaged team at the whole company, to the highest. A 30% increase in productivity, and ultimately made them $4 million this year. Just to bring that to life too, because it's a little deeper than that, they went from making 150 boat parts a week to 250 boat parts a week. And since they did this, they uncovered this, now it's been 10 months ago, that team that was turning over 100% year over year, think again of all that money lost, training time to fill the vacancies, have lost 0 people on that team. It's dramatically transformed and changed the culture. So hope that was helpful. Those were the 7 tips. I was just going to do a really high level overview of what we do. If it's helpful, I'll try to keep it to 2 minutes and then open it up for questions. Does that sound good, Nathan?
Yep, no, that's perfect.
Okay, sweet. So just so you guys know, we're Amplify. We're a team of 65 people. We're out of Indianapolis, and we wake up every day with one purpose, and that's to change the work lives of 1 million Americans. And what we do, how we do that is we help leaders make better business decisions. As a leader, because of your role power or whatever it may be, oftentimes it's difficult to see inside the hearts and minds of your people, whether it's because of location or role power. And so oftentimes what you think is going on is different than what's actually going on in your people. And it's squishy, and it causes you to waste time and use gut feel. And you've got it's an expensive problem, because over the rest of your business, you've got all these other metrics that help you know how you're doing. But that one metric that you are truly tasked with, inspiring your people to bring their best self. Am I getting the most out of my teams? There's no metric for that, which is what we call employee engagement. So that's what we did. We really do 2 things. One is we created a metric that becomes a quarterly KPI in your organization that helps you know if you're maximizing the output of your people. And 2 is we deconstructed all the aspects of the employee experience, worked with psychologists, PhDs, et cetera, to help you scientifically find out what is causing disengagement. And then once we figure out what it is, we tell you how to fix it. And so how we do that is simply a quarterly system that we run in your organization. Starts with a survey, then we ask your people to self-solution around problem areas, and we come alongside and do an hour of coaching after both of those 2. With the end of the day, the goal is that you have focused time to make the best decisions as a leader, spend less time guessing, less time wasting, and more time solving really simple initiatives that can most unlock performance on your team. So we ask for 6 minutes of your people's time, and you'll be equipped with data like this that will help you really see inside the hearts and minds of your people. So that's it. I'll open it up for questions if we have time, and I can't thank you all enough. I truly hope you got one thing out of this. We'll stop there.
All right, Adam, that's great. So one of the questions I had was around just like the data part, because I know one of the things I think that organizations struggle with, I know we did, and I'm presuming that it's more than just us that have this problem or had this problem or work on this problem, is about either the feeling safe to provide the feedback, either the confidentiality around it, or like just feeling like they're not going to be, I mean, that's a cultural issue too, if they feel that you're going to be retaliated against by getting feedback, but just the general feel like, I don't know if I want to give candid feedback to my leadership and management team. I don't know that how do you help solve that problem with your process?
That's a great question, and some of that is you have to earn it as a leader. You know, transformational leadership is a process, and so we help one way tactically, which is we get introduced as a third party, and so that helps because now that person, you know, we're really explicit about how we protect confidentiality and anonymity. But the other part is just the frequency, right? We run our system every quarter, and the key is, as a leader, it's not about, this is why annual surveys, for example, didn't work. You'd run the survey, you'd get a 300-page binder, you'd be bummed about all that you learned, and then you're worn out 10 weeks later. Whereas with what we do, the idea is consistently listen to your people, consistently make decisions that feel in alignment with them. And what we found is that, you know, especially if you're in like a really highly disengaged organization, you can start to earn that trust over that by that third quarter. You know, when you start to, when they go, whoa, like when we ask for their feedback and then they listen, there's something going on here. And that's how you kind of get that continual process in place.
Yeah, so don't expect necessarily, you can earn that, and you can see improvements by being responsive, right? So not only asking, but you got to show that you're listening and actually, you know, respond to their feedback, right? You know,
right. I always
obvious, but I mean,
it does. It seems obvious, but if you think of like the three most common ways, like why consistent feedback and consistent asking helps, there's really three. One is that people, like if your employees don't feel like, typically an employee doesn't feel like they get asked the feedback enough. So one, asking makes things better. Two is employees want to know that you know their situation. So just like talking honestly about what's going on, that helps things too. And then the third is when, as a leader, I make actions, they feel in alignment with my people. That's really where the magic comes together. Asking consistently, communicating about what you learn, and then making decisions that feel connected to them.
Well, Adam, that's fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this today. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I want to talk about this. You know, folks might be wondering, I should have brought this maybe in the beginning, but is our this quarter we're really focusing on non-technical topics as far as to our clients and our team, just to kind of share some things, because we all have culture that is important and is integral to our business, and so that's something that we have an event in Colorado next week, actually next Tuesday, where we're going to be talking about an aspect of our culture around communication and personality profiling that uses lions, camels, turtles, and monkeys instead of ENTP or some of the other profiles that are out there, colors. And then also next month we're doing a panel on from people who clients and vendors that we worked with that are culture representatives, and what are the things and tips and tricks, what have they done to build culture, and what are the activities they do to sustain a great culture in their organization. So that's a couple things coming up. And then we have one of the most popular, it was the most popular session at our annual event that we did earlier this month, was our live hacking demo. So we're doing that again here in Minnesota in July, and then the first week of August, or the 1st of August in Colorado. If you want to be blown away by seeing how it's actually led by a guy who worked for the NSA and the government, proactive cyber defense and cyber warfare. And so if you want to be blown away, come to that event here in Q3. So with that said, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, Adam, for really walking us through how to build a winning employee engagement strategy. Great tips. And we can share the information that you mentioned on there as far as the research that you talked about, being able to deliver that, and we can get some of the content from the slides as you mentioned, if people are interested. So thanks a lot for your time, and we'll sign off.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks, Nathan.
All right. Thanks, Adam.